This first lap shouldn't exist. Max Verstappen jumped into a Mercedes GT3 at the Nürburgring, a track where even professionals take days to adapt. And on his very first lap, he went flat out. No warm-up, no hesitation. Just full commitment through corners where one mistake ends everything. And within minutes, people watching trackside realized something was wrong. Not with the car, with Formula 1. Because what he just did exposed a massive difference between real driving and what drivers are dealing with right now under FIA regulations. Think about this. A completely new car, different braking system, different weight, different physics, and he looks more comfortable than he does in his own Formula 1 car. That should not happen. Stay until the end, because the final detail explains why this could change everything for Formula 1. Subscribe now, or you're going to miss what comes next. But here's what makes that first lap even more shocking. It wasn't reckless. It looked calculated. That's the part that confused everyone. Because when a driver pushes that hard, that early, you expect mistakes, small corrections, moments of hesitation. But there were none. The car stayed stable. The lines were clean. And every input looked intentional. Almost like he already understood the car before finishing a full lap. And that should not be possible. Because the Nürburgring doesn't allow shortcuts. It punishes overconfidence instantly. Blind corners. Sudden elevation changes. Sections where grip disappears without warning. Even experienced GT drivers build up slowly there. They respect the track first. Then they attack it. Verstappen did the opposite. He attacked it immediately, and it worked. And this is where the first big question appears. How can a driver trust a completely new car that quickly? Because trust is everything. Especially with ABS braking. Especially with a heavier car. Especially on a track like this. Most drivers need laps to feel that limit. To understand how the car reacts under pressure. But Verstappen didn't wait for that process. He skipped it. And that tells you something very important. He wasn't guessing. He was reading the car in real time. Weight transfer. Grip levels. Brake response. Everything instantly processed. And that ability changes everything. Because it means adaptation is not his limit. It's his advantage. But here's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because that same driver, with that same ability, is struggling in Formula 1. Not with speed, with feeling. And now the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, a car he just met, and full confidence from lap 1. On the other, a car he's driven for months, and constant complaints about unpredictability. That doesn't add up. Unless the problem is not the driver. And this is exactly why this Nürburgring test is raising questions. Because Formula 1 today is not just about driving. It's about managing systems, hybrid deployment, energy recovery, software layers controlling performance. And every one of those layers moves the driver one step further away from pure control. But in that Mercedes GT3, none of that exists. No hybrid complexity. No artificial interference. Just input and response. Simple, direct, real. And from the very first lap, he looked completely at home. That's not just impressive. That's revealing. Because it shows exactly what kind of environment allows him to perform at his absolute best. And more importantly, what kind of environment doesn't. But this is where the story takes another turn. Because that first lap created attention. What happened after it created concern. Because after that first lap, he didn't slow down. That's what really started to worry people. Usually, a driver pushes once, then resets, builds rhythm, finds consistency. But Verstappen did something completely different. He kept pushing, lap after lap. Same intensity, same precision, no drop-off. And that's where the situation changes completely. Because one fast lap can be instinct. 2 laps can be confidence. But repeating it, that's mastery. And he reached that point almost immediately. This is where the Nürburgring exposes everyone. It's not about one moment. It's about maintaining control over time. Managing traffic. Managing tires. Managing risk. And yet, he looked like he had already figured it out. Overtakes started to appear. Clean. Precise. Late braking into tight sections. Using the weight of the car to his advantage. No hesitation. No wasted movement. And that's when people inside the paddock started asking a different question. Not how fast he is. But how is he doing this so quickly? Because this level of adaptation should not scale like that. You don't go from first lap aggression to race level control in a matter of minutes. Unless something else is happening. And this is where the real concern begins. Because while he was doing all of this, his radio messages told a completely different story. calm, focused, even relaxed. Talking about lines. Talking about learning the circuit. Enjoying the process. No frustration. No complaints. No confusion. And that is the biggest contrast of all. Because in Formula 1, those same radios sound very different. Short, tense, frustrated, talking about issues, about unpredictability, about things outside his control. And now, you have two completely opposite versions of the same driver. One struggling to connect with his car, and one completely in sync, almost instantly. That difference cannot be ignored anymore. Because it points directly at something deeper. Something structural. Something that goes beyond one test, or one track. It points to the direction of the sport itself. And this is where the FIA comes into focus. Because the current regulations are designed around complexity. More systems. More variables. More control from outside the driver's hands. And what Verstappen just demonstrated is what happens when you remove all of that. The driver takes over again, fully, and the performance follows immediately. But here's the problem. If that becomes obvious to everyone, then the entire philosophy of modern Formula 1 starts to look questionable. Because what is the goal? More technology? Or better racing? More control? Or more connection? That's the question nobody wanted to ask. Until now. Because this Nürburgring test didn't just show a crazy first lap. It exposed a comparison that Formula 1 cannot hide anymore. And once fans, teams, and even drivers start seeing it, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because the real issue is no longer performance. It's identity. What is Formula 1 supposed to be? And after what Verstappen just did, that question suddenly feels a lot more urgent. And this is where everything becomes impossible to ignore. Because once that question is on the table, it doesn't go away. It spreads. From fans, to analysts, to teams, and eventually, to the drivers themselves. Because they all saw the same thing. A driver stepping into a completely different car, on the hardest track in the world, and looking more natural than he does in Formula 1. That is not just impressive. It's uncomfortable. For everyone involved in the sport. Because it forces a comparison that Formula 1 has avoided for years. Not about speed. About experience. About what driving actually feels like. And here's where the situation reaches its peak. Because Verstappen didn't just prove something to others. He proved it to himself. That's the key detail. Because once a driver experiences that level of connection again, it resets everything internally. Expectations change. Tolerance drops. What used to feel normal, now feels compromised. And that creates tension. Not publicly. Not immediately. But internally. Every lap in Formula 1 after that feels different. Every limitation becomes more noticeable. Every system becomes more intrusive. And that builds something dangerous over time. Doubt. Not about ability. About direction. And this is where the FIA faces its real challenge. Because you cannot regulate emotion. You cannot engineer feeling. You can design faster cars, more efficient systems, more advanced technology. But if the driver feels disconnected, none of that matters. And Verstappen just highlighted that. Without saying a single direct criticism. He didn't need to. His driving said it for him. That first lap. Those following laps. The consistency. The control. The calm radio messages. All of it points to the same conclusion. When the environment is right, he reaches another level instantly. So now, everything leads to one final question. Not about Nürburgring. Not about GT3. Not even about that incredible first lap. But about Formula 1 itself. Can it still offer that same connection? Or has it moved too far in another direction? Because if the answer is the second one, then what we saw at the Nürburgring was not just a moment of brilliance. It was a glimpse of something Formula 1 might be losing. And once that realization sets in, it changes how you see everything that comes next. And if that's true, then this story is no longer about one driver. It becomes about the future of the sport itself. Because moments like this don't stay isolated. They create reactions. They start conversations behind closed doors. They force people to look at things they were comfortable ignoring. And right now, that's exactly what's happening. Teams are watching. Drivers are comparing. And quietly, they're asking the same question. Does this feel right anymore? Because what Verstappen showed was not just talent. Everyone already knew that. What he showed was clarity. Clarity about what real driving looks like. What it feels like. And how quickly it comes back when nothing is in the way. That's what makes this dangerous for Formula 1. Because once that clarity exists, you can't hide from it. You can't explain it away. And you definitely can't ignore it. But here's the final layer, the one that ties everything together. This didn't happen in a race weekend. It didn't happen under pressure. It happened in a test. A simple test session that ended up exposing more than an entire season. Because in that environment, there were no expectations, no championship points, no strategy limitations, just driving. And in that pure state, the difference became obvious. Too obvious. So now, everything leads to one unavoidable reality. If a single test, on a completely different track, in a completely different car, can raise this many questions, what happens when more drivers start doing the same? What happens when this comparison becomes normal? Because once that happens, Formula One doesn't just face criticism. It faces pressure. Pressure to evolve. Pressure to rethink its direction. Pressure to bring back something it may have lost along the way. And that's why this crazy first lap is much bigger than it looks. It's not just a highlight. It's a signal, a warning, that the gap between pure driving and modern Formula One might be wider than anyone expected. And if that gap keeps growing, then the real question is no longer about Verstappen. It's about how long Formula One can ignore it.